And indeed, things just get easier in many ways to do. So we transitioned to C, and today
after 9 years of CS50 and 8 years of people asking us to do Python instead of PHP, we finally made the switch.
Yeah, it just felt like it was time. I mean, Python kind of has much of the momentum in terms of web programming these days. But you know what put me over the edge was increasingly with each year have we refined our approach to web programming in PHP, and we gave students a bit more framework or representative code. We introduced MVC some years ago. We gave them a library to facilitate SQL queries in recent years too. And this past year, what I was really inclined to do was give them a bit more of distribution code for like CS7, CS50 Finance, that would also handle routing, so that routing would get handled through some one central file like index.php, as is often the case with a lot of PHP frameworks these days. And honestly, at that point, the closer we got to taking over routing from the language, which historically had been done with individual files and different directories and so forth, like we did in CS50, at that point, we're really losing the advantages of PHP and how there was so little distance between the file system and the files themselves and the controlling role that they played. So it felt to me like at that point, if I'm going to be giving them this much boilerplate code and abstracting away those details, let's just go to where most other people have been skating.
But it really gave us an opportunity to dig deep into the equivalent of week 8 in the past and reinvent a lot of stuff. Like in terms of the staff, a lot of the staff was familiar with Python, but some folks weren't, and so it was a radical change.
Yeah, no, I mean, I had to pick it up myself, certainly, and try to map things past to the present, figure out what still made sense, what didn't, redo all of the examples, think about how we would implement PSET7 and PSET8 and so forth. But it's a wonderful, I think it's really strengthened, I think, this part of the course now because, I mean, Python, just as a practical matter, is just so useful in other contexts too. I mean, I really like this year how in PSET6 we made that no longer C, but Python as well to explore machine learning and sentiment analysis, because now you had an opportunity to use the language at the command line too before we transitioned in PSET7 to web programming. So you sort of get the best of both worlds.
Yeah, exactly. We never had the equivalent of a PHP at the command line, which you could do, but we never had a problem set about it.
And it was just never the right language for command line scripts. Like you could use it, and I used it for years, but it's just not really done as much. So this was a win, and I was nervous because we've never made this non-trivial of a change, like ripping out the whole language. Most everything else has been pretty marginal and incremental, like switching to SQLite away from MySQL, for instance. But this was impactful, but it seemed to work well. We got through it, and it was enough time. It turns out, out of, I think, perhaps a bit of nerves, our Python lecture was the longest, I think, of our lectures this year. I was just so excited to talk about it and make sure we really hit every mark we could.
But I think that also, since you brought up PSET6, we used to have the web server, which was the final C PSET. We instead, as you mentioned, had a Python command line PSET where we also got to reintroduce some of the problems from PSET1 and PSET2, which is a great way to allow students, I think, to get used to the language without having to also solve a brand new problem. That was only half of it. The other half was to actually solve a new problem. But it really took that barrier to entry away as well, I think.
I agree. But it's stuff like this that I was a little nervous about, because unlike C to JavaScript, where there really is more of a line-for-line mapping.
Or C to PHP.
Or C to PHP, whose documentation, too, I always loved. I think PHP.NET is stellar, and Python's, I think, is less so. It just,
there's no equivalent to that.
Range, it doesn't line up quite as well. And so it's a bit more of a mental leap, and that's okay. And I do think it worked well. And it's inevitable if students are going to go pick up the language on their own. So I was just perhaps a little overly conservative for some time, but it worked out.
Now, in addition to the question of PHP versus Python, there was then the follow-up question, which is Python 2 or Python 3.
Yeah, so I did my Googling and my due diligence, talked to some folks, and it felt like now there's enough momentum behind Python 3 that if we're going to do this, let's go all in and not like have to upgrade from Python 2 to Python 3 in a year or two once we've put out all of these materials. And the reality is, so far as CS50 is concerned, there's terribly few differences between the languages that our students might encounter so early on. Print, for instance, might be one such example. And there are others they might encounter later, but I was comfortable with that. And there's just so many nice new features syntactically and also functionally in the library that comes with Python 3 that was compelling.
Yeah, and I would say for anybody who's watching this and is learning Python themselves, I'd say that the one tip I would give you, it was what I was doing, was when you're searching for things in Python, search for Python 3 how to
Yeah.
do something, not necessarily Python how to do something. It's the one catch, but I agree. I think that if we had used Python 2, we would have had to been playing catch up probably in 2017 instead of.
Agree. So we leapfrogged that.